The music of ReZero is godlike. So, I have been rewatching ReZero since season 2 completed. The reason being that I wanted to prepare myself for the web novel and really just get invested into the world of ReZero. And you know what? There's something I just realized when I was rewatching this show. The music slaps, yo! No, but seriously, the music in this show is very, very good. Kenshiro Suehiro, the composer, managed to create the beautiful pieces that varied in all types of emotions. Now, some pieces are intense, fast-paced and epic, like Death Ballad. Others are sad and have this peaceful tone to it, like Act of Sorrow. And some pieces are just soul-crushing, like Requiem of Silence. And some pieces are just so cheerful and cute, like Petra's theme. So, ReZero does not only have mad waifus, but also very good music. Way to go, Tappe. Okay, but what actually makes the music of ReZero so great? Just saying something is good is very subjective and doesn't really tell us why it's good. So, what makes the music so good? Well, there are many things I could analyze. I could analyze the harmony. I could analyze the chord progressions, the tempo, the articulations, scales, and much more. But as I listened to the music of ReZero, there were two things that really stood out to me. Nearly all of the pieces have strong melodies and are beautifully orchestrated. So that is what I want to talk about today. How Kenshiro Suehiro makes strong melodies and orchestrates his pieces. Okay, so before I begin, I want you to know that I will be using 5 pieces for my analyzation. Takt of Heroes, Chain of Memories, Requiem of Silence, Called Out by Your Voice, and Petra's theme. First off, Takt of Heroes. Now this piece is probably the first piece that I ever noticed when I was watching the show. It's just super hype. The first time we hear this piece is when Reinhardt battles against Elsa in episode 3. Later, we hear it again in episode 21 when Subaru and the Anastasia and the Crutch Camp battle against the White Whale. And lastly, we hear it again when Julius and Subaru battle against the Witch of Sloth. Now, one thing that makes this piece so catchy is its riff that starts right after the intro. Now let's look at the transcription. Now this riff is mostly made up of notes from D minor, and since this track is played in the key of D minor, it creates a very stable sound. So the riff lasts for 16 whole bars and alternates between 2 chords, D minor and D minor / B. Now you could call this a B minor 7 flat 5, but that's just very unnecessary in my opinion. So in the key of D minor, it goes from the first chord to the flat 7th chord. Personally, I kinda like this sound. It sounds kind of harsh and ominous, perfect for being played when battling against a disgusting opponent like Betelgeuse. Moreover, one thing that I really like about the melody is how it uses articulation to maximize the intensity of the song. Not only does the piece use staccato violin, it also is extremely rhythmic. Let's look at the transcript. See how it combines 16th notes and 8th notes? The riff is not played like this. But instead, like this. This just makes the riff a lot more interesting and fun to listen to. Additionally, I really like how this riff repeats itself after the 8th bar. You may ask, what just happened? Well, two things happened. First of all, it transitioned. This transition is just a D-Dorian scale, played upwards. It's kind of neat and prepares us for something bigger. The second thing that happened is that the riff repeats itself but 1 octave higher. Repeating something but 1 octave higher is an easy way to create more intensity while keeping the listener comfortable. I say comfortable because the listener has already heard the riff, but now it's being presented in a different way. Now, one thing I can say about the orchestration is that the brass gets louder after the 8th bar. This is a great way to intensify your piece. Now, as this piece is about to reach its climax, this riff appears yet again, but now it's presented a little different. The thing that has changed was the chords, or the bass. Instead of D minor and D minor / B, we now have 4 chords that lasts only 1 bar instead of 2. The bass now moves from D to E to F to G and then repeats. Like I said about repeating a riff 1 octave higher, another way of making the listeners feel comfortable yet bring something fresh to the table is by changing the chords around the melody. So, quick summary, what can we take away from this analysis? To create a catchy riff, if unsure, rely on the 1, 3, 5 of the key of the piece. 2. Be creative with your riff. Make it more rhythmic. 3. If you have created a good melody, don't be afraid to reuse it again. To make a riff feel fresh, either change the chords being played around it or play it 1 octave higher or even lower. 4. If you want a cool transition, keep it simple. Just walk up or down a scale. Moving on. Chain of Memories. Now this piece is first played in episode 7, in a scene where Rem kills Subaru for suspecting him to be related to the witch cult. Bruh, watching this shit was sad as hell. Later, we hear this piece being played yet again, in episode 18, as Subaru tries to convince Rem to flee the country and live with him. Bruh, watching this shit was sad as hell. Later, we hear this again, as Wilhelm kills the white whale that killed his wife. Bruh, watching this shit was sad as hell. Now, this is clearly an emotional piece, so let's analyze how the melody and orchestration brings those emotions to life. Okay, before I talk about the melody, I need to talk about the intro. Can you hear the sustained violin that plays an F sharp? It's so nice, isn't it? And using a sustained note like that is a great way to create anticipation. Notice, however, that it's an F sharp that is being sustained and that the key of the piece is in F sharp minor. You can use other notes, of course, that are in or even outside the key that you are composing in, but be aware that it might not sound as good due to harmony. Okay, so the first thing I noticed as I was transcribing this piece is that the main melody often lands on a suspended harmony, specifically the sus4 chord. For example, we see this in the 2nd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th bar. Take a listen. Now, what's so special about the melody landing on notes outside of the normal major and minor chords? Well, sus chords often sound kind of ambiguous. It's neither sad or happy. It's kind of both. Take a listen. This is a major chord. Sounds very happy. It's kind of straightforward. This is a minor chord. Sounds sad and like the major chord, kind of straightforward. And this is a sus chord. sounds... well... what does it sound like? It sounds both sad yet happy. And going from a sus chord to a major chord is a great way to voice lead. And this piece does it a lot. I'm gonna show you an example. Listen to this. I'm gonna play a C sus4 to a C major. Listen. That's nice as hell, isn't it? Okay, one other thing I really liked about this melody is that in the last repetition of the main melody, we hear this counter melody play. It's very subtle, but it's there and it makes a difference. It's kind of nice. Moving on. Again, in the last repetition of the main melody, the orchestration intensifies. We as listeners perceive it as such mainly because of two factors, the deep bass and the unison harmonies. So, the first time we hear the melody, the bass isn't really there, but in the last repetition of this melody, the bass is used to add a sense of climax. In addition, even though the melody did not go up an octave higher for its climax, the melody sounds a lot thicker. My speculation is that when we first hear the melody, it's played with maybe only one set of violas or cellos. And when the melody is played again, it's played by multiple sets of string instruments. Maybe the violins and violas are playing the same melody, but in unison. Unison meaning playing the exact same notes in the exact same octave. So, quick summary. 1. You can use a sustained note as an intro. 2. Landing on the 9th or 11th to create a suspended harmony can give off a more complex feeling. 3. Use counter melodies. They are nice. 4. Save the bass for the climax of the piece. 5. Don't be ashamed of using unison harmonies to create a thicker sound. Moving on. Requiem of Silence. This is probably the most tragic piece to be ever played in the ReZero series. To my knowledge, this piece is only played once, and that's in episode 15, when Rem dies as she tries to save Subaru from the witch cult. Now this episode was absolute pain, and I think the piece did a marvelous job of creating that tragic atmosphere. Now, to the analyzing. One thing I found very interesting about the main melody of this piece is that it used the harmonic minor scale. In our case, C minor, we get to use this B note instead of a B flat. Listen to these two bars. Damn. It's so intense. Now, see the two chords I wrote there, F minor and E flat. Now, when the B note plays, it creates a dissonant harmony. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say I play an F minor chord. Okay, all good. Okay, now let's add a B to it. What chord is it now? You guessed it. It's an F minor with a flat 5. Extremely dissonant because of two reasons. The C and the B colliding, and the tritone that is being created because of the F and the B colliding. Listen to this chord again. Like, it's disgusting. In a good way, of course. The second bar plays an E flat chord. Let's play an E flat chord. Now, let's add a B to it. What chord is it now? You guessed it, it's an E flat with a sharp 5, and it's very dissonant, and that's due to one reason, the B and the B flat colliding. Now, another thing I really liked about the main melody is how it sometimes rests on the 7th note in relation to the chord. Listen. Now, playing the 7th in the melody is a great way to add more color to your piece. Now, the composer could have landed on the 1 instead. Listen. Now that would work, but it doesn't really give off that same feeling of melancholy like the seventh note did. At least that's my personal opinion. Okay, moving on to orchestration. One thing I really liked about the orchestration was the use of arpeggiated chords coming from the cello in the last repetition of the main melody. Listen. Now, that's disgusting. Talk about adding intensity. Now, one more thing I want to add about orchestration is brass. Brass. Holy shit, man. I don't know what it is, but combining strings with brass is a great way to create a super dramatic piece. So, in summary, what can we take away from this analysis? 1. Don't just stick to the natural minor scale. Test the water and try maybe the melodic or the harmonic minor scale. 2. Don't be afraid to land on the 7th. It's a great way to add more color to your piece. 3. Create chords with a non-chord instrument, like the cello. 4. Brass. Use brass, man, it's awesome. Moving on, called out by your voice. This is probably the most wholesome piece of them all. It's sad, yet it has this sound of kindness to it. I love it. Now, this piece is first played in episode 4 of season 2, when Subaru faces his past and meets up with his parents. Later, we hear it again when Otto saves Subaru as he was kidnapped by Garfield and put into an empty building. I just love this scene, man. Otto is best boy Otto for a reason, man. So about the melody, one thing I really like about it is that it's very easy to remember because of its simplicity and repetitiveness. Look, the pattern of the melody is very simple. Now, harmonically speaking, one thing I really like is how on this B flat major 7 chord, the melody lands on the 13th and then stays on the 7th. And on the F chord, it lands on the 11th and then lands on the major 3rd. Lovely! I mean, harmonically speaking, it's a lovely way to create a more unique melody. About the orchestration, I love how the main melody is played with woodwinds and then switches to the strings. And this is a great way to repeat the melody without it getting very stale. Lastly, I really like how the piece removes the bass from the F chord. It's just a great way to spice things up, you know. In summary, what can we take away from this analysis? 1. From woodwind to strings. 2. Keep the melody very simple. 3. Landing on the 13th or 11th and then immediately going to the 1, 3, 5 or 7. 4. Removing and adding bass. Removing the bass and then just immediately adding the bass again is just a great way to add intensity, I guess. Moving on, Petra's theme. Now this piece is played in the first episode of season 2, when Petra is clinging to Subaru's arm because she thinks Emilia will take away Subaru from her. This piece is just so cute and fun to listen to. Now, I don't have many things to say about the melody directly, so I'm just gonna talk about the whole piece, I guess. So yeah, one thing I really like about this piece is that it has a lot of different articulations. In the beginning of the piece, we hear string pizzicato, and then the melody uses staccato, and it varies between using sustained notes and staccato notes. Another thing I really like about this piece is that it switches instruments entirely. If we listen to the first repetition of the melody, it's played with like a recorder, and then when we hear it again, the main melody is played with strings. shit, it sounds awesome. And the last thing I want to talk about, it uses double melodies or harmonic melodies because two notes are being played at the same time when it comes to the string section here. It's just a great way to thicken the sound of the piece. So kind of quick summary, don't be afraid to play around with different articulation. Use pizzicato, use staccato, and all that fun stuff. 2. Switch instruments. 3. Harmonize the melody. This is just a great way to create a more rich and interesting sound to the melody. And that's it basically. So this video took a lot of time to edit, so if you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you want. I will be making more videos like this in the future. Also, I am an aspiring composer, so I took the tips and tricks I gave on this video and gave them as advice to myself. So now I have composed something kind of similar to the vibe of the ReZero soundtrack. Hope you enjoy.